Right now, I am at an action at Cook County Jail. Today, April 11th, holds unique significance in Chicago. April 11th is the day that Nicholas Lee died in Cook County Jail from COVID. His wife, Cassandra, called over 130 times to try to get him help before he died. And so this is the 1 year anniversary of his death in Cook County Jail. A year ago, exactly a year ago, Chicago Cook County Jail was cited as the #1 hotspot of COVID in the country. And we know that detention centers and all places of incarceration are petri dishes for COVID. The United States has done an abysmal job of preventing COVID transmission and has led the world both in COVID deaths from a civilian standpoint as well as from an incarcerated standpoint. The tragedy is further exemplified by the fact that of the statistics that we know, 1 in 5 people incarcerated have been infected with COVID, and that's only of the statistics we know. And as of April 6th, a total of 392,595 people have been officially counted as having been infected with COVID. We know that that number is not accurate. We know that that is only of the official numbers of the institutions who have submitted numbers. Not all institutions have been submitting numbers. In Illinois, for example, the Illinois Department of Corrections stopped updating their numbers. And so we don't have an accurate count of everyone who has died. April 11th is also another heartbreaking anniversary date. April 11th, 2016, 16-year-old Pierre Laurie was shot and killed by Chicago police officer Sean Hitz. Pierre was killed just blocks away from Homan Square. And Homan Square is a Black site in Chicago where between 2004 and 2011, at least 7,000 people were disappeared. We know that statistic only because the Guardian newspaper, a publication out of the United Kingdom, sued and had to sue for those numbers. And those numbers only represent that finite period of time. So the true number is actually not known. The true number is much larger than that, possibly 20,000. And so today, while discussing while there are no George Floyds in Cuba, it is also resonant, particularly here in Chicago, to discuss and to add to that list why there are no Nicholas Lees in Cuba, why there are no Pierre Lauries in Cuba, why there are no Laquan McDonalds in Cuba, why there are no Ahmaud Arbery's in Cuba. And unfortunately, the death toll created by systemic violence, by state violence in the United States, and particularly in Chicago, has not ceased. Within the last 30 days, CPD has killed 3 young people. Adam Toledo, who was only 13 years old, was shot and killed just less than 2 weeks ago. Anthony Alvarez, 22 years old, was shot and killed just blocks from his house by a Chicago Police Department. Trayvon Chadwell, just 18 years old, was shot and killed right in front of his apartment as well. And these statistics are heartbreaking because we know that this level of systemic violence is going to continue because the mechanisms that are necessary to eradicate this type of violence have not yet been made possible, have not yet happened. We are seeing slight reductions in killings, but that's not enough. We don't want simply reductions. We want to eliminate the root cause. And the root cause is US capitalism. What August just talked about hits the nail on the head with how and why the United States is so particularly violent to its population, why the United States has the largest incarcerated population in the world today and in history. And the reason why the United States has the largest population is also linked to the underlying reasons why the United States also leads the world in COVID deaths. Both of those percentages are 25%. The United States holds 25% of the global deaths due to COVID and holds 25% of the world's incarcerated population. Yet, the United States is only 4.25% of the global population. The reason for this is why Cuba led and won a socialist revolution against the United States. It was to save the lives of its population. It was to create a country, to create a system that is not built on the exploitation, murder, torture of its population to enact and extract wealth for a tiny, tiny few, but to create a system where the resources and the wealth of the soil are equally distributed throughout the country, and where what people actually need to survive is administered and is given priority. And we see that in so many ways. That is made true by the fact that COVID has been relatively, people have has been a drop in the bucket of deaths in Cuba in comparison to the United States. We see that in how the vaccine is being distributed in Cuba versus the horrendous distribution efforts that are happening here in the United States. In Chicago alone, we can see how segregation continues throughout, even in the distribution of the vaccine. The first people who are being distributed are in the wealthy white centers of the city. Meanwhile, the majority of people dying are Black people who live in the poorest sections of the city. Even with the distribution of the vaccine, we see how the system fails to reach the most vulnerable and the people most in need. And the reason we have no George Floyds in Cuba, the reason we have no Laquan McDonald's, we have no Trayvon Martins, is because of the socialist revolution. And that must be clear now for us fighting in the United States. We have many, many proposals for reform on the table that have come up. We have many people who have become celebrity, quote unquote, activists, right? Who are in the media. But we must be very, very clear that it is the entire organization of this system that conspires to murder and super exploit and torture our population. It is not an accident. And that is why we must look to the lessons of the Cuban Revolution and be inspired that we too—
Aislinn, just to let you know, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. That we too can create the world we need to live in. That we too can have no more George Floyds and no more Nicholas Lees and no more Rekia Boyds and no more Adam Toledos and no more families suffering from the immense amount of state violence that is routine in the United States. Thank you very much.